Recently I've been having a lot of people comment about my spelling abilities, and it doesn't have to do with the fact that I'm getting worse at spelling. It has to do more with my putting my work out more, publishing more people seeing it. So, I mean, there's nothing I can really do about it except hide under a rock and never write another thing. However, because it's becoming more frequent, it is more frustrating. Let me just tell you that I was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADD, which is no longer in existence, in grade 3. And I'll get to that explanation of dyslexia later. Most people know it as a disorder where you switch things around and you can't spell or read very well. And that's not exactly what it is, but we'll talk about that. Because of the people in my life, my mother and my father and great educators, I was taken out of special ed at the age of, in grade 5, and I've gone on to finish high school, graduate from my bachelor's degree, and am now working on a master's. So I'm doing excellent. I mean, as excellent as anyone can do, of course. I mean, I'm not suffering truly because I was labeled with dyslexia. But when you have friends who make fun of you because you have to ask how to spell a word, or people who comment constantly on your Facebook because you missed an apostrophe or you misspelled something, it begins to wear you down. I mean, it makes me feel like I'm stupid, and there's no way to explain to these people because they don't understand, or they're like hundreds of miles away on the other side of their computer, that I have dyslexia and my brain works differently. Before we get too far, let's look at the history of learning disabilities. Learning disabilities encompass a huge range of things. Dyslexia is considered the mother of learning disabilities. It's one of the first words to describe people who think differently and cognitively work through things differently. This all came about in what scientists and historians consider the Foundation era in Europe. So the 1800s to the 1920s, that's for Europe. A man named Franz Joseph Gall was the first to pioneer the studies of brain injuries and their relationships to cognitive thinking or mental illness. And then in 1895, we have more studies, and we begin to see studies of young adults. Heinzel Wood, I guess, started looking at the disability of word blindness in a 14-year-old boy, and considered one of the first studies to be on adolescents. In the 1920s, we have a man named Samuel Orton who coined the phrase of, I looked how to say that. Man, this is a hard word. And because I have dyslexia. Stephasinoblia. No, that's not it. Just a second.
Strephosymphilia.
Thank you, computer. So strephosymphilia. And if you break that word down, stress means to twist, and then symbolic means symbol, so those two words meaning twist symbols, and that's where we may have gotten our understanding of dyslexia as people turning words and letters upside down. So everyone understands learning disabilities. It's a big field of study. Scientists are studying it all over. And then in 1973, the Rehabilitation Act is passed by Congress, and it gives Americans with disabilities the right to not be discriminated against. And then in 2008, Americans with Disability Act was passed and gives students with learning disabilities the right to not be discriminated in class, and it's a basis for getting accommodations, and accommodations are things that students with learning disabilities and other disabilities are given so that they can reach their full potential. Some of my accommodations were having tests read to me, having longer time for tests, and things like that, having software that you could read or speak and then it would write for you. It's a short history, but nonetheless a history, and now we have a huge amount of learning disabilities and students are being labeled with them all over. There's dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD. It's quite a bit. I want to focus on dyslexia because that's what I've been labeled with for most of my life. Ronald Davis wrote a book about the gift of dyslexia. It's an excellent book. And if you have dyslexia or you know somebody who does, they need to read it. It will boost your self-esteem. The subtitle is The Gift of Dyslexia, full title, and then the subtitle is Why Some of the Smartest People Can't Read and How They Can Learn. I mean, the subtitle just makes me feel good. Why some of the smartest people? So Davis describes dyslexia as a self-generated condition, meaning that a lot of people have tendencies for dyslexia, but it's never fully found in them because of they just didn't experience something, they didn't experience trauma or anything that caused them to go down the path of dyslexia being such a debilitating issue for them. So you cannot be diagnosed with anything like OCD or ADHD or dyslexia, anything like that. You can't be diagnosed unless it disrupts your life in some manner. So my mom, who misspells a word sometimes, will say, oh, it must be my dyslexia. She hasn't been diagnosed because it has not fully disrupted her life and because she grew up in the 60s and they didn't really do that as much as we did now. I was diagnosed kind of at the beginning of this educational time we have now where everyone's being put on drugs and everybody's being diagnosed with ADHD, and it's a frustrating era. But let me explain what I mean by frustrating. When humans were hunters and gatherers, right? Some 100,000 of years ago, 20,000 years. We haven't talked about the first piece of art, have we? The Venus of Willendorf? I think we have. But cave paintings, the first things we used to communicate were symbols, hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics, yes. And the written language, being so founded in our society, is a relatively new thing. With the invention of the printing press, everyone had a book, and so reading became more important. Now, with public education becoming so important and everybody being educated to read and be literate, these learning disabilities have become more prominent. And it's not coincidental, I don't think, because these issues of learning disabilities have been around forever. I mean, it's only a way of thinking, really. Let me read what Davis says in his books. He says that people with dyslexia, or the gift of dyslexia, have benefits. They can utilize the brain's ability to alter and create perceptions. They are highly aware of their environment. They are more curious than average. They think in pictures instead of words. They are highly intuitive and insightful. They think and perceive multidimensional. They can experience thought as reality, and they have vivid imaginations. That's a description of someone who is highly inventive and highly intelligent. Our society today puts so much interest on being able to read that we forget the gift of insightfulness or discernment or creativity or being aware of one's environment. Someone with dyslexia or a learning disability is usually highly gifted in some area. Art, sports, it can be math even. It's just that we focus so much on someone's ability or inability to do something, such as read or write, that we forget that they are way above average in a certain area that has nothing to do with writing. I just wanted to make this video because I know it will never go away. I know that unless something ginormous happens and we have some sort of cultural shift while I'm alive. But I know that I'll always be frustrated and people will always be frustrated with my writing. But I want people to know who have dyslexia or know someone who has dyslexia or a learning disability. I don't want you to think of them as less or not intelligent just because they can't do the thing that society says they should be able to do correctly. I read all the time. I just read slower than you. I write all the time, but I just use a software that writes for me. Hath not a dyslexic eyes? Hath not a dyslexic... I said Jew, I'm sorry. Hath not a dyslexic eyes? Hath not a dyslexic hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same fruit, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, held to the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer? Of course, I'm blowing things way out of proportion. But if you, maybe I can bring it back with reality. I have a good friend who is one of the loveliest people I've ever met. She works with people less fortunate than her, and she's always giving, and she just does things differently than a lot of people would, but they're things that you just sit back and say, you're not even from this time. It's like you are this chivalrous character from a different era because you're just so fantastic. And she was diagnosed with dyslexia, and when she went to school, she had teachers call her lazy, and people make fun of her. And I think that kind of understanding of a dyslexic or someone with disability shows a lack of foresight and a lack of understanding and, if I may, a disability on that person's part. I just want you to know, if you're out there and you feel the same way as I do, frustrated by this problem, that it's not going to go away yet. And it may never will. May never will. But just, I don't even have any advice for you. Just know that there's someone else out there, I guess. Read that book. I'll put a link in it in the bottom part for the book on Amazon. It's an excellent book. And really, as Ellen says on her show, be kind to one another. Don't make fun of each other because of that. Don't make fun of each other because of the way you look or the way you... just be nice to each other, I guess. I don't know. I just was frustrated and I wanted to share it. And I love talking, apparently, so... That's pretty much it this week. Next week we will be going to Western Europe. I'm very excited about it because I've lived there for a number of years and I'm just excited to talk about it and show you pictures. So, I will see you next week. Recording my voice for the thing. Oh, look at that. That's so cool.